Hello, I'm starting my new podcast. I'm not sure what the name of it is going to be yet. But this is a rewatch podcast of Young Sheldon. So, for the first episode, called The Pilot, stars Ian Armitage as Sheldon Cooper, Zoe Perry as Mary Cooper, Lance Barber as George Sr., Montana Jordan as George Jr. / Georgie, Reagan Reward as Missy, and Wyatt McClare as Billy Sparks. Okay, so let's hop right in. So, older Sheldon talks about how he loves trains, and he would have been a ticket taker if theoretical physics hadn't worked out, or hobo. And then Mary yells, "Shelly, dinner's ready," and then Sheldon doesn't come. He continues to play with his trains. And then Missy threatens to lick Sheldon's toothbrush, to which Sheldon says she's done it before. Sheldon runs to the dinner table and explains he was doing dimensional kinematics. And then George Jr. thinks that Sheldon is adopted, but Sheldon says, "How can I be adopted if I have a twin sister?" Think, monkey, think. Just straight up insulting Georgie. And then Mary wants to pray, so Sheldon puts his mittens on. George is mad that Sheldon puts the mittens on, and something leads me to believe that Georgie never washed his hands, because Sheldon asked Georgie, "Did you wash your hands today or even this week?" And then Georgie, instead of saying like, "Of course I did," or "Yeah," says, "None of your business." I mean, I'm just saying, it seems like I think he would probably say if he washed his hands, if he did. So that just leads me to believe that he did not. So Mary asked everybody who wants to go to church with him tomorrow. But before that, Georgie asks about tater tots and why Mary didn't cook them. And Sheldon explains he developed a Mid-Atlantic accent because a Nobel Prize winner ought not be ordering tater tots. Anyways, Missy and Georgie start getting into a food fight because Mary makes Missy go to church, and then she proceeds to swear at Mom. Nice. And then Mary hits Missy, and then Georgie starts laughing, and gets some food fight started. And Sheldon explains how Jane Goodall had to go to Africa to study apes, and yet he had to go to dinner. So we're in the church, and Pastor Jeff is talking about evil thoughts, and Pastor Jeff is played by Matt Hobby. And then Sheldon tells or asks his mom, "Do you have evil thoughts?" And then Mary says no, and she tells him to really pay attention. And then Sheldon asks Missy, and then she says she's having one right now. And she said that it was when they got home, she was gonna kick his little balls. So then Sheldon asks some kind of inappropriate stuff to Mary, which I'll skip over because I'm trying to keep this PG-13. So I'll avoid talking about most inappropriate topics. Okay. So we cut to Sheldon is not able to find his bow tie. And Mary is kind of panicking because she knows that Sheldon is gonna wreak havoc if he doesn't find his bow tie. So, and George says that he's gonna get bullied if he wears a bow tie. But Mary insists that he have it, so she blames Georgie and starts scavenging in his room and finds some. I believe she finds some not very appropriate stuff. She found some of that in Georgie's room. And so then George tells Mary that she took it, or that he took it. And he explains again that he's going to get bullied for wearing a bow tie. So then we cut to the car, and Mary says to Sheldon that people are going to be intimidated by his intelligence, and Sheldon, being very confident, says maybe they'll recognize my intellect and make me their leader. Sheldon's kind of weird. And then Mary prays to God to not let Sheldon get stuffed into a gym bag. Anyways, we cut to Miss McElroy's class, and she introduces herself, and she says that she taught some of their older brothers and sisters, and sadly some of their parents. Anyways, Sheldon, or she proceeds to introduce Sheldon because he's 9 years old in high school. Definitely makes sense. But then Sheldon raises his hand and then proceeds to just be like, this guy is wearing sports attire out of a designated area and starts ratting everybody out about the dress code. And then proceeds to say, and against the grooming code, you have a bit of a mustache. And he says that to Ms. McElroy. So, in the principal's office, everybody, like all the three teachers and the principal, George and Mary, are talking about how Sheldon doesn't belong in the school and how he should be at like a special, well, not special ed, but like Miss Ingram is the black teacher. She says that Oral Roberts University is a wonderful school. And then the principal, what the heck, he says that he asked George to help him out because he's dying. Not actually, obviously, before, but like, and then George proceeds to pass it on to Mary, and Mary says that they don't have a choice. And then the principal's like, well, you gave it your best shot. We wish you luck with Sheldon elsewhere. And then Mary's like, no, he has to stay here. And then once again, the principal is like, George, can you help me out here? I'm dying. And then George goes, I'd rather not. So then we cut to Sheldon. Sees a music teacher playing the cello. And then he starts playing exactly the same notes on a piano nearby. And then the music teacher asks him how long he's played piano, and then he says he doesn't play piano. And then she is playing notes on the piano, and Sheldon just knows them without even playing piano. Crazy, right? And anyways, so we cut to the football field, and then Georgie gets paired up with a kid to do some sort of drills. I'm not very familiar with football. So then the kid says, hey, look, it's the dumb brother. And that angers Georgie. So he starts tackling him and beating him up. And then once Coach Wilkins and George pull Georgie off the kid, he runs off. And then he goes to his locker and starts throwing stuff. And then he says he quits football. And um, and then George and Georgie have this moment where they're talking about how Sheldon is in the same school as Georgie and how Georgie hates it, and George says, "As your coach, you better get your gear on uh, and get back out there." And then Georgie says, "What about my dad? What about as my dad?" And then George says, "Your dad's not having a very good day. Listen to your coach." And then Missy, we get to Missy and Sheldon watching Professor Proton. Missy complains that it was boring and she wanted to watch DuckTales because they were watching Professor Proton. And then Sheldon is like, we don't learn anything from DuckTales. And then Missy says it's TV, we're not supposed to learn. And then George walks in and tells Missy, or he turns off the TV and tells Missy to go somewhere else. And then Missy says, "How about you go somewhere else and I watch DuckTales?" And then George says, "Go." And then George proceeds to tell Sheldon about why they moved from Galveston to Medford. And that was because when George was a coach in Galveston, he saw coaches recruiting kids from another school to play for their team. and he told the principal about it, and he got fired for it. So, and then Sheldon says, "Oh, that's why you drink so much." And then Sheldon asked George if he was sad about losing his job, and then George says he was mostly angry, but yeah, a little sad. We cut to the next day at the dinner table. They start saying grace. Sheldon puts his mittens on, but mid prayer he takes the one off for the hand with his dad and holds hands with his dad for the first time. And he goes on to explain how he wouldn't touch his brother's hand until like 17 years later, thanks to the invention of Purell. And that is where the episode ends. This is going to be mostly a YouTube podcast, so you can find it on there. Might be a little while before I upload the next episode because I haven't even watched it yet. I mean, I've seen the whole show, but it's been a little bit since I've seen the second episode. But the next episode is the episode where Sheldon tries to find a friend because Mary is upset that he doesn't have any friends. So, yeah, tune in next time for that episode. Peace.